Have you ever wondered why some men forget every woman except her? Why he might walk away from beauty, kindness, even loyalty, but cannot release the one woman who haunts him in silence? This isn't romance, it's psychology. Archetypal, ancient, and buried deep in the unconscious structure of masculine identity. Carl Jung called it the anima, the feminine image that lives inside a man's soul, formed from fragments of memory, desire, mother wounds, childhood longings, and buried emotion. And when a woman unknowingly mirrors that image, especially through behaviors that are emotionally elusive, sovereign, and mysteriously intimate, something in him cracks open. But it's not love, it's obsession. This is not the obsession of pleasure, but of projection. A wound demanding to be seen, a hunger he doesn't understand, a pull he cannot name. She becomes the symbol of what he abandoned in himself long ago, the lost feminine within. The first behavior that awakens this obsession wound is not loud. It's not seductive in the way society tells you to be. It's absence, her withdrawal, her silence. But not the silence of punishment, the silence of wholeness. The kind that emerges from a woman who has nothing to prove, nothing to chase, nothing to perform. You see, most men are not obsessed with a woman. They are obsessed with what she represents, a part of their own soul they never integrated. The quiet, intuitive, emotionally sovereign feminine that he was taught to suppress. And when she pulls back without anger, without drama, without explanation, she becomes a mirror he cannot turn away from. His ego rages. His logic collapses. Jung taught that the male psyche splits itself, the persona, the mask he wears, and the shadow, the buried truths he hides. And many men, especially those who are emotionally disconnected, project their entire unlived life onto the woman who does not need them. Why? Because her lack of need is the very thing that disarms his control mechanisms. When you stop giving him the validation he's addicted to, when your warmth retreats not in bitterness but in indifference, something primal happens inside him. He doesn't miss you. He misses the part of himself that only woke up in your presence. And that's why he chases. Not to love you, but to reclaim what you stirred. This is the deep feminine power most women never realize they hold, not through seduction, but through detachment, through the quiet refusal to be consumed by his hunger. There is a second behavior that activates the obsession wound, and it is her emotional mystery. She doesn't overshare. She doesn't bleed all her feelings to be understood. She allows the unknown to remain unknown. She understands that curiosity is the mother of fixation, and that mystery, not availability, is what awakens desire in the masculine unconscious. A woman who can sit with her emotions, who does not demand to be decoded, who leaves gaps in her story, she becomes the unfinished novel he keeps reading in his mind long after she's gone. Jung said, "Man becomes whole only when he confronts the inner feminine. And that confrontation often begins not with a woman who gives him herself, but with one who reflects his unworthiness back at him by remaining unattainable." Do you understand what it means to be spiritually untouchable? It means you no longer shrink your light to soothe his ego. You no longer explain your intuition in logical terms. You no longer shapeshift to be liked. You become sovereign, not as rebellion, but as embodiment. And that is unbearable to the male ego that seeks ownership over what it cannot understand. He does not want a woman. He wants control over the parts of her he cannot access. And when she remains whole in her mystery, he either ascends into self-awareness or falls into obsession. This is the feminine that does not seduce with body, but with being. And the final behavior that unlocks his deepest obsession is perhaps the most dangerous: unapologetic self-worth. A woman who walks in the certainty of her value, without arrogance, without need for proof, disrupts the foundation of every man still ruled by his wounds. She doesn't need to convince him. She doesn't need to show him who she is. She knows. Her presence alone becomes a mirror, not the flattering kind, the spiritual kind, the kind that reflects his emotional immaturity, his avoidance, his performative masculinity. She does not blame. She does not explain. She simply exists as a living invitation. Rise to meet me or watch me leave. And many men, they fall apart here. Not because she hurt them, but because she did nothing. And in doing nothing, she revealed everything. There is something alchemical about a woman who chooses herself, not in defiance, but in devotion. She becomes a force, not one that demands, but one that transforms merely by existing. This is the paradox of the feminine that most men cannot name. The more deeply she roots into her own worth, the more violently she stirs his inner chaos. Not because she is cruel, not because she withholds affection, but because her very presence demands a confrontation with what he has refused to feel. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And this is precisely what unfolds in the man who becomes obsessed. He believes he is choosing her. He believes it is fate, serendipity, magic. But what truly magnetizes him is not the woman herself. It is the mirror she holds, the parts of his soul she evokes, the grief, the awe, the unmet longing she unintentionally resurrects. This is the feminine archetype he never met in the world, the one who does not shrink when he withdraws, who does not run when he rages, who does not break when he disappears. She remains rooted in herself, and that stability dismantles every illusion his ego constructed about power, masculinity, and control. Do you understand how rare this woman is in today's world? Most people chase love from fear. They contort themselves to be wanted. But the woman who has done her shadow work, who has walked through abandonment and rejection and still stands whole, she does not need to pursue. She attracts by the laws of psyche and soul. And this kind of attraction is not light. It is dangerous. It pierces the false self he presents to the world. It strips away the masculine armor he's worn since childhood, the armor built from pleasing, proving, performing. Suddenly, he is raw. He is exposed. He is not being pursued. He is being seen. And that, for a man who has never been met at the level of his unconscious, is unbearable and unforgettable all at once. Obsession, then, is not rooted in love. It is rooted in projection. And projection is the mind's way of placing its unlived truths onto another so that it can avoid responsibility for its own healing. She is not his salvation. She is his signal. She signals the end of his emotional avoidance. She signals the beginning of his descent into self. That is why he becomes fixated. Not because of what she does, but because of what she represents. She is not a lover. She is a catalyst. The most dangerous thing a woman can ever become to a man is not a seductress, but a reflection of his inner feminine, fully awakened and fully unavailable to his manipulation. And when that happens, when she becomes the symbol of what he cannot possess and cannot replace, obsession takes root. But not all obsession is loud. Some men do not chase with words. They chase with memory, with sleepless nights, with the ache of a presence that lingers long after it is gone. She becomes the ghost in his unconscious, not because she wounded him, but because she revealed him. And now, nothing else feels whole. Other women feel too easy, too eager, too obvious. Because once a man has encountered the feminine who is complete within herself, he can no longer be satisfied with the incomplete, in her or in himself. And yet, he may never return, because returning would require the death of who he thought he was. It would require surrender. And only a man who is ready to dissolve the ego can truly rise into the kind of love this woman inspires. Until then, he remains in longing, in fantasy, in projection. She is no longer even there, but she lives inside the mythos of his soul, not as a lover lost, but as a lesson never integrated. And that is what Carl Jung understood. The feminine does not destroy the masculine, she awakens it. And that awakening is what either breaks the man or rebuilds him. There is a moment, subtle, invisible to the eye, when a man realizes he cannot own her. Not her body, not her mind, not even her memory. She has slipped beyond the edges of his control, not because she ran, but because she simply stopped dancing for his approval. And in that stillness, he is confronted with a truth so old, so primal, that it shakes the very architecture of his masculinity. He never knew her. He only knew what he projected onto her. Carl Jung warned that until a man integrates his anima, the sacred feminine within, he will endlessly search for her in women who cannot give it to him. He will hunger, obsess, idealize, discard, over and over, never realizing he is chasing something internal, not external. And the woman who awakens this in him, she isn't perfect. She isn't even trying. She simply is. Authentic, mysterious, rooted. Her radiance does not burn to be noticed. It burns because she has made peace with her own darkness. She has faced abandonment and refused to beg. She has tasted rejection and refused to close. She has walked through the fires of her own emotional chaos and emerged not desperate but divine. And that is what breaks him open, not her love, her sovereignty. It's the way she holds eye contact without fear, the way she walks away without theatrics, the way she says no with a softness that still slices his pride in half. She does not try to fix him. She does not try to save him, because she knows, in the marrow of her bones, that the masculine must walk his own path to wholeness. And here is the brutal truth. The moment she chooses herself is the moment he realizes he has lost something irreplaceable. Not because of her beauty, not because of her body, but because she carried the medicine he didn't know he needed. The medicine of truth, the medicine of emotional maturity, the medicine of feminine depth. And that medicine is bitter, especially for the man who has built his life on performance, on conquest, on control, on ego. He was never ready for her. And now that she's gone, not in body, but in soul, he will search for her energy in every woman who follows. But he will not find it, because what he truly craves is not her, but his own healing. Jung would say she triggered his individuation process, not because she taught him, but because she mirrored the vast unmet spaces within him. She didn't complete him. She exposed where he was incomplete, and he confused that revelation with desire. So he calls it obsession. But in truth, it is longing, longing for self, disguised as longing for her. This is what makes her unforgettable. She is not a memory, she is a mirror, and most men shatter in front of mirrors they cannot manipulate. This is the psychic wound she opens without touching him. The sacred feminine wound that says, you cannot possess what you do not respect. You cannot hold what you will not rise to meet. And for the woman who lives from her depths, who is no longer moved by validation, who has tasted the power of her own silence, she doesn't wait to be understood. She moves, she releases, she ascends, not to punish, but to preserve her energy. And it is in that preservation that she becomes mythic. He tries to forget her. He tries to replace her. He tries to suppress what she stirred, but he cannot. Because obsession is not about her, it's about him. His soul recognized something sacred and ungraspable in her, and now he is haunted by what he failed to honor. He tells himself it was timing, circumstance, maybe even her fault. But beneath the justifications in the cavernous silence where a man confronts himself, he knows. She was the one who didn't need him. And that truth threatens every illusion he ever had about power, worth, and masculinity, because he spent his life defining himself by how much a woman wants him. But she was different. She didn't want. She chose. There is a world of difference between a woman who wants a man and a woman who sees him clearly and still decides to keep her distance. That woman is dangerous to the ego. She is sacred to the soul. Carl Jung knew this. The feminine is not weak. It is not passive. It is not fragile. It is wild, intuitive, ancient. And when a man meets a woman fully in her feminine power, not the seductive mask, but the embodied truth, he has two choices. He can rise into initiation or collapse into obsession. The obsession is not about desire. It is about the confrontation with lack. She becomes the evidence of his emotional immaturity. She becomes the reminder of the sacred intimacy he is too afraid to enter. And every time he remembers her, a scent, a voice, a fleeting glance from another woman who reminds him of her essence, his chest tightens. Not with love, with loss. Not of her, of himself. Because what he lost wasn't someone who needed him. He lost the chance to meet the woman who required him to become emotionally literate, to become inwardly stable, to become self-led. And he couldn't. Not then. So now he replays it in his mind, again and again, the things he should have said, the way she looked at him in silence, not with anger, but with knowing, as if she could already see the man he refused to become. The feminine sees in layers. She doesn't need proof. She feels the fractures in his spirit. And while a wounded woman tries to fix them, a healed woman lets him go. That letting go, that quiet, sovereign departure, it is the wound he can't name. It cuts deeper than rage, deeper than begging, deeper than any dramatic goodbye. Because she didn't slam a door, she left it open, and then never looked back. There is no fury in her absence, only clarity. And clarity is what burns, especially for a man who has lived in the fog of performance, approval, and false power for too long. Now he is left with echoes, not of her voice, but of his own conscience. This is the secret Jung tried to reveal, that the feminine is not here to complete a man. She is here to awaken him, to summon him into wholeness. But that call is terrifying, because to answer it, he must dismantle everything he thought was strength. He must sit with his emotional cowardice. He must face the love he rejected, the mirrors he smashed, the truth he ignored. And for many men, that kind of spiritual accountability is too great. So instead, they obsess. They rewrite the story. They scroll through photos. They listen for her name in conversations. They search for her energy in every body they touch, but they never find it. Because that kind of woman, the one who stood in her essence, unbothered, unchasing, she wasn't offering romance. She was offering initiation, and he refused the call. So now, the only thing he holds is the ghost of what could have been. And perhaps in his quietest hours, he thanks her. Not for loving him, but for being the one who finally shattered the illusions. The woman who didn't abandon him, but revealed how he had abandoned himself. There is a strange kind of reverence that grows in the heart of a man who has lost a woman like her. Not the surface woman, not the performance, not the role, not the mask, but her, the untamed presence. The one who looked through him instead of at him. The kind of woman who wasn't trying to be loved. She was trying to be free. And freedom is what terrified him. Because freedom cannot be controlled, and he was never taught how to hold what he could not conquer. The obsession wound, Jung would say, is a symptom of spiritual refusal. It emerges when the ego cannot integrate what the soul is being called to evolve into. He wanted her softness, but not her boundaries. He wanted her energy, but not her depth. He wanted her light, but without facing his own shadow. So when she pulled away, not in bitterness, but in the quiet grace of a woman who finally knows her value, his world tilted. She became the symbol of what he could not reach. And symbols, unlike people, don't fade. They grow. They expand in the mind, distort in the heart, consume the memory. They become sacred, not because they were perfect, but because they held meaning. She held meaning. Not just through who she was, but through what she revealed. That his inner structure was hollow. That his masculinity had no roots. That without validation, his identity collapsed. This is what the feminine power does when it stands in silence. It exposes the fragile scaffolding beneath the masculine facade. She didn't try to shame him. She didn't even try to teach him. She simply refused to be smaller than her truth. And for the man still ruled by ego, still clinging to control, her refusal was unbearable. He wanted reaction. He wanted proof that he mattered. But what he got was a woman who no longer needed to perform love to feel whole. And that's what shatters him. It's not her leaving. It's how calmly she did it. How complete she already was without him. How unshaken her worth remained in the wake of his absence. Because he expected a collapse. But what he witnessed was resurrection. The resurrection of a woman who remembered who she was. And now he is haunted, not by her presence, but by what her presence awakened in him. This is what makes her unforgettable. Not her beauty, not her body, not even her love, but the confrontation with truth she brought into his life. And truth, when it is rejected, becomes obsession, a psychic loop, a hunger that no longer has a source. He reaches for her in women who mirror only fragments. He dreams of her in moments he doesn't speak of. He thinks of calling, but doesn't. Because deep down, he knows. He is no longer worthy of the invitation she once extended, and he does not yet have the courage to rise into the man that invitation required. So he lingers, trapped between remembering and forgetting, between longing and pride, between who he was with her and who he could have become. And the woman? She no longer waits. She no longer watches the door, because she has become the thing he feared the most, whole. And in that wholeness, she no longer belongs to the archetype of the longing woman. She has shed the skin of yearning. She has released the story of trying to be enough for a man who could not meet her in the realm of soul. She is no longer the reflection of his wounds. She is no longer the carrier of his unmet needs. She has returned to herself, sovereign, still, and unshaken. The path she walks now is not paved by validation or touched by nostalgia. It is carved from silence, woven through choice, and that silence, it echoes louder than any scream, for it is the silence of detachment, the silence that says, you no longer have access here. Carl Jung knew. When a woman withdraws her projection, when she calls her energy back into her body and reclaims every piece she once scattered for love, she becomes ungraspable. Not only by the man who failed to hold her, but by the collective male psyche still ruled by egoic conquest and emotional passivity. And that is the highest form of feminine power. Not seduction, not manipulation, but indifference born from integration. She is not bitter. She is clear. She doesn't romanticize his potential anymore. She sees it for what it was, a mirror to her own former wounding. The parts of her that once believed love had to be earned, proven, or sacrificed for. But she knows now, love is not sacrifice. Love is not begging. Love is not molding yourself to be palatable for a man afraid of depth. Love is presence. Love is reflection. Love is expansion. And she has become all three. Alone. In her stillness, she is magnetic. In her distance, sacred. In her gaze, there is no invitation, only recognition. I once loved you, but now I love myself more. And what of the man? He remains circling the edges of her memory, unable to release the ache. Because he never really wanted her freedom. He wanted her affection tethered to his comfort. But she broke the spell. She became unavailable, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. The same necessity that births the butterfly from the cocoon. Not because it hates what it was, but because it can no longer survive in that shape. And now, he remembers her in everything. In the quiet, in the laughter of other women that doesn't quite match her resonance. In the late-night stillness when pride loses its grip and regret slithers in. He remembers how she never needed to speak loudly to be heard. How she never chased. How she simply was, a force, a current. A presence that slipped through his fingers the moment he tried to own it. And this is the truth no man wants to admit. The woman he obsesses over is not the one who begged to stay. It's the one who left with grace and never turned back. The one who demanded nothing. And in that nothing, revealed everything. Her very absence forced a reckoning. Not with her, with himself. That is the feminine in her highest expression. She teaches not by words, but by being. She heals not by staying, but by leaving. And her love, the love that once flowed toward him freely, vulnerably, openly, now flows inward, upward, and outward into a life that no longer makes room for men who cannot meet her in their fullness. This is not bitterness. This is rebirth. For she has outgrown the prison of potential. She has buried the version of herself that clung. She has risen, not in rage, but in reverence. For herself, for her path, for her truth. And the man who once thought he could return whenever he pleased now stands before a locked door in the shape of a woman he can no longer recognize. She is not the girl he remembers. She is the woman he never had the courage to meet. And the great paradox remains. He had her, but he never held her. And now she is untouchable, not because she hides, but because she has nothing left to prove. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.